first racing game I ever owned was Outrun. The problem is that it was for my ZX Spectrum and it didn't actually work, so I kind of got off to a bit of a bad start with the franchise. I eventually played some version of the arcade original, and after getting used to the way that the line-scrolling game worked, I fell in love with it. I was a huge fan of the soundtrack and the aesthetics of the game. You and your smoking hot blonde girlfriend have to traverse across 5 stages from a possible 15 whilst avoiding traffic, roadside obstacles and the game's timer. Each stage is unique and the game has a ridiculous amount of replay volume. Each route you take has a different ending, which is completely unnecessary but adds nothing but charm to the overall experience. The game's also pretty difficult. The timer is very tight, and if you crash more than twice, you may as well just reset. Outrun got ported to just about everything, Specky included, and the Mega Drive version is a solid entry. Yeah, the game has a darker palette and it feels a bit choppier, but it's still a very solid part of the game and it captures just about everything. You even get a bonus song, which is okay. Definitely a great entry to the Mega Drive library, and you're not really sacrificing anything in the gameplay department. Now this is more of a real racing game. Developed by Codemasters, this game is absolutely brilliant. This was my first entry into the Micro Machines racing franchise, and I think I actually picked it up via a newspaper listing. It had a really weird cartridge which provided an extra 2 controller ports allowing up to 4-player action. Unfortunately, I didn't really have any friends, so this was single player only for the majority of my childhood. Micro Machines 2 pits you against 3 other vehicles as you tear across a huge number of tracks. The game is top-down and the controls are guaranteed to confuse anyone that doesn't understand the concept of turning your car with left and right as opposed to pointing it wherever you want it to go. I think the controls are perfect, though I've also never had any kind of issue with tank controls. The racing sections are fun, but the real meat of the game lies in its multiplayer. The game's aged perfectly and I still pull it out at game nights because these days I actually have several friends. One of my favourite memories of this game is on one of the kitchen stages. We both drove up onto a sponge that takes you across the kitchen sink, and midway at the same time me and my friend realised we could actually ram into each other to knock each other off the sponge. Try this with some friends over a few beers. Why is it that some of my best memories of games revolve around beer? I originally owned this game on the SNES, and like all things that required moderate brain power, I was pretty crap. I don't think I ever got past the first snow level because I just couldn't grasp the concept of lobbing grenades. Well, fast forward to my late teens, and my friends and I were up until around 2 AM playing this game on one of those plug-and-play Mega Drive consoles. We took it in turns to play each mission and had a whale of a time. Cannon Fodder is an anti-war game whose message was totally missed by a lot of the press at the time. It's point-and-click, real-time action, strategy, shooter, or something to that vein. You take indirect control of a squad, tell them where to go and what to shoot on the way to completing each mission. Each recruit has their own name and will rank up after each mission they survive. This means that when they die, and they will die, you'll genuinely feel a sense of loss. They even get their own gravestone. When we were playing this in my friend's kitchen with some tinnies, and one of us let Jules die, we felt not only that we'd let ourselves down, but our entire friendship group as well. The game's a lot of fun to play once you get to grips with the control scheme. It's a huge game with about 70 odd levels altogether. I've never completed it and probably never will, but that's not stopped me from coming back and playing it again and again. If you're familiar with any of my previous work, you'll know I'm a Sonic the Hedgehog fan. These days I've mellowed out a fair bit, but back in the 90s I was Sonic mad. I owned a lot of the VHS tapes for the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog and damn near wore them out. So when I went into some video game shop and saw the box art for a game featuring Robotnik, Scratch and Grounder, I instantly wanted it. I asked for the game for my birthday, despite being warned by several people that it wasn't really a Sonic game. Finally, my birthday rolled around, and I opened my second-hand copy of the game, shoved it in my Mega Drive and thought, what the hell's this? Even though people warned me that it wasn't a Sonic game, I still expected it to be a platformer of some kind, maybe with a sneaky appearance of Sonic, but no, it was some weird puzzle game with blobs, or beans in this case. Yeah, I was stupid enough that I was totally blinded by the box art and didn't even bother checking the back. So I kept playing through and had a great time, up until stage 2, where the difficulty curve blasts off into the stratosphere. Frankly took my chubby little arse and handed it straight to me, and I don't think I ever got past him as a kid. It's only when I replayed the game on the Ultimate Mega Drive Collection on the PS3 that I actually started to grasp the mechanics of the game a little bit more. Now this all sounds very negative, and to be honest, my experience as a Sonic-obsessed pre-pubescent pork pie was definitely not great, but let's not forget that the Puyo Puyo series is still going to this day. That's because, at its core, it's a fantastic game with very solid mechanics. As you get better at the game, you'll discover just how addictive it is, so learn the game, beat Frankly, and enjoy yourself. This is a fantastic puzzle game underneath the superficial Sonic branding. The only reason that this game isn't in my top 5 is that the game is most fun when you play this with friends. What with my aforementioned lack of friends, I didn't play this much as a kid. Well, that and the fact that I never really owned or even played it up until I was in my teens. I've always struggled with beat 'em ups because I have a fairly short attention span, and once you've beaten the first couple of levels, the game doesn't really change in any way other than throwing more enemies with more HP at you. So Streets of Rage 2 still falls into that category, and once I've played half the game I'm pretty much done, but that doesn't mean that I didn't have fun. In my opinion, Streets of Rage 2 is the best of the Mega Drive trio. The controls, graphics and sound are perfect. It doesn't really do anything that other beat-em-ups haven't done before, but what it does do, it does extremely well. The difficulty curve is pretty fair, and the stages don't outstay the welcome. As a single player experience, it does get boring after a while, but when you play this with a friend, you'll have a much better time, so long as you're not punching, grabbing and throwing each other instead of the enemies. Here's another one that I never had as a kid but grew to love in my adulthood. My first actual experience with the Ghosts and Goblins series was playing some kind of port on a family member's PS1. I thought the game looked fun with this cute little knight guy fighting zombies and was excited to give it a go. Then I played it and got absolutely destroyed. I can't complain, I got the authentic Ghosts and Goblins treatment. When I was in my early 20s and really getting into composing chiptunes, I got into the work of Tim Follin and particularly enjoyed his work on the Commodore 64 version of Ghouls and Ghosts. That led me to actually play the game for the first time, eventually settling on my favourite version, the Mega Drive port. It's nowhere near as pretty or polished as the arcade original, but it plays just as well, and much like Outrun, nothing's really been sacrificed in the conversion. Ghouls and Ghosts is still brutally hard, but it's helped a little bit by some additional pre-boss checkpoints, which reduces the risk of controller going through TV. Great game to play with a friend too if you enjoy taking turns over a few beers. This wasn't my first ToeJam & Earl game. I got Panic on Funkotron first and loved it because it played like a mascot platformer. When I eventually got the original game a couple of years later, I was kind of unimpressed with how slow it was, how garish the colours were, and also just how the game worked. I'd never heard of a roguelike before. All I wanted was platformers with colourful graphics. As the years went by, I began to appreciate this game for what it was, a bit of a weird masterpiece. Now, Masterpiece doesn't have to be perfect, and this game is far from it. The controls are kinda weird, you're never quite sure which button you press will do what, especially when navigating menus. The graphics are pretty ugly, the sprite work looks kind of amateurish, and the colour selection is pretty vile. That blue water will burn your retinas if you're not careful. It's also pretty brutal in its difficulty. The enemies will chase you relentlessly, and some of them are totally unfair, like the mailboxes and the mad doctors, and once they catch you, they'll take away a good chunk of your health. So, what's good about this game and why is it so high up if I've done nothing but complain? Well, the soundtrack is a certified classic for one. One of those rare instances where the Gems sound engine doesn't sound like someone's chucked a metal bucket full of bees into an industrial shredder. There's also a lot of influence from the likes of Herbie Hancock and Funkadelic in the instrumentation and the compositions. If you don't believe me, take a listen to Chameleon by Herbie Hancock and tell me you don't instantly think of ToeJam and Earl. The main place the game shines is in its multiplayer. The game encourages you to talk to your co-partner, splitting up in your exploration of a stage, and letting each other know who's found what. You don't work against each other, and it splits up the chore of exploring a stage. It's true co-op. Fantastic game, great for when you're hanging out with your mates. I loved mascot platformers. I bought into them much like a 40-year-old divorcee buys things off the shopping channels. I can't actually remember how I came across Dynamite Headdy, but it'll have been either on the review section of Sonic the Comic, or just by me seeing that beautiful box art. I really was a sucker. Dynamite Headdy is by Treasure, so you know there's going to be gimmicks galore, big flashy boss battles, and graphical tricks that your tiny mind thought impossible for the lonely 16-bit Sega Mega Drive. The game delivers on all of these points, and it delivers it very well. Each stage is unique, and it has its own gimmicks, and all of the boss battles do something really cool, apart from the first and the last boss actually. And it's so unbelievably colourful, you'll forget that the Mega Drive could display a maximum of 64 colours at a time. Sadly, one crippling factor for this game is the absolute brutal difficulty. The Japanese version that I played much later is way more manageable. It's still difficult, but it's fair, whereas the Western version is just ridiculously unforgiving. They messed around with HP, continues, enemy placement, hitboxes and more. Probably for that rental market that was so big in the West. You can beat the Western version of the game, but you're going to need a lot of patience and really try to get as many continues as possible. Alternatively, you can play it on the Ultimate Mega Drive collection and make use of save states. It's not cheating if you don't care what anyone thinks about you. As a little bonus, this game was one of the first to genuinely terrify me, thanks to the puppeteer and Gentleman Jim. I had to turn the volume down because I found the music so scary. Speaking of masterpieces, I'd find it hard to not award Ristar with the same title. I hear a lot of hidden gems talk about this game, but I picked this up when it was new and totally fell in love with it. It's another one of those games where you forget about that 64 colour limitation, and what with all its gimmicks, you'd be forgiven for thinking this was a treasure game, but it's an in-house Sega title released right at the end of the Mega Drive's life. Ristar is a great example of taking a core gameplay element, in this instance Ristar's grabby, stretchy hands, and building an entire game around it. Every single use you could think of for Ristar's abilities is used in some way, whether it be via boss battles or navigating stage hazards. It's an oddly fast-paced game too, considering that Ristar walks pretty slowly and can't jump very high. I've beaten this game countless times and find it hard to not play the whole thing whenever I do shove it into my Mega Drive's wanting slot. Each stage, boss battle and stage soundtrack is unique, and the whole thing is just an absolute joy to play. Ristar rewards you for mastering his abilities by allowing you to get through the stages quicker and find more secrets. Fortunately, the game's just about on every single Mega Drive collection now, so it's not hard to find, so you can definitely give it a whirl. Or, if you can find it at your local Blockbuster, rent it for a weekend. How could it be anything else? This is the best Sonic game ever made in my opinion, and I'll fight anyone who thinks otherwise. Yeah, the game got split into two originally, but when these two cartridges bump uglies, you'll unlock one of the greatest platform games of all time. Sonic 3 Knuckles improves on every single thing from Sonic 2. Bigger stages, more unique stage gimmicks, more abilities like the Insta-Shield for Sonic, actual use of Tails' tails, gliding and wall climbing for your boy Knuckles, as well as some extra super abilities for all characters. The special stages are also way better than those from Sonic 2. They're less choppy and Tails can't cock up your ring count. The sound effects are annoying. It sounds like a dog getting its temperature taken repeatedly. But the stages don't take tons of memorization like the ones in Sonic 2 do. The soundtrack's also vastly superior to previous entries, introducing seamless act transitions as well as Act 2 remixes, which I totally loved. It gives each stage a unique feel and shows just how far we've come from Sonic 1 with its 3 acts all containing the same colours and the same music. Hydrocity Zone Act 2 is my favourite Sonic tune of all time. Are there flaws? Well, a few. Sandopolis Zone is probably the low point in the game. I can't decide whether it's due to the eye-straining piss yellow colour scheme in the first act, or the labyrinth-like layout of Act 2. I also died a hell of a lot in Act 2 as a child, and the parts of the Rising Sand still gives my heart a little bit of a throttle. Oh, and the best part of this game is that it has a save feature, something that really held Sonic 2 back in my opinion. I know things like cartridge manufacturing costs have to be taken into consideration, but Sonic 2 is a very long game. If you were a kid and had to do homework, I never did my homework. Have your dinner, I had lots of dinner. Have a bath, or whatnot, it meant you didn't get much time to actually play the game. There's only so many times you can play through Emerald Hill and Chemical Plant before you start to hate the slog of getting through them. Yes, there's a level select, but when I owned this game, there was no readily available internet in every home. My cheat codes were in a certain Sonic the Comic magazine, and if I ever misplaced that, I was screwed. And Sonic 2 also introduced Super Sonic. He had a few glitches, but he took quite a lot to unlock, and once you turned off your Mega Drive, it was back to square one. Basically, Sonic 3 Knuckles is an absolutely amazing game, and I have no problem with labelling it my favourite Mega Drive game of all time. Hope you've enjoyed this list. Bye!